Hey there, it's me, Matt. And today we're gonna talk about design stuff. I've got a big series in the pipeline. It's actually not the series I promised you, that one will have to wait. But I found a different thing that I really want to present and I want to present it properly, so I'm really taking my time with this. But I also don't want to leave you guys hanging, so today we're just gonna have a little chat. And the thing I would like to talk about today is basically design stuff in architecture. As you might know by now, this channel is mainly about world building, and more often than not, you're also gonna do some visual stuff. Whether you're creating concept art for your book, or maybe you're just an artist, or maybe you're just drawing something to get a better idea what you're actually coming up with, and basically inspire yourself, which, by the way, is a great thing to do. Like, just start drawing, just go crazy. There are a lot of scenarios where you want to come up with a building, and building things is quite hard. But there are some tips and tricks you can follow to build great stuff. And to better illustrate my points, I'm gonna revert back to my Valheim self. Because even though there are not that many building blocks to choose from, Valheim is great for practicing architectural design. It even emulates structural integrity, like when you build too high or build wrong, then the building will collapse. It's also pretty nice as just an easy creative outlet. For example, if you have an idea but you can't draw, you can just create it in Valheim. You could also create it in Minecraft or any other building simulator. But I don't know many other games that simulate stability and gravity, so... Alright, here we are in me and my friends' village, and I'm just gonna show you around and see what I can talk about. We have the Grand Cathedral. This was so far the biggest thing I built in the game, and we did it entirely without any mods or cheats. This is all vanilla stuff, and I'm quite happy with it. Also with the interior, turned out pretty nice. And there's already something we can talk about here, because if you want to make something appear big, you have to play with space. That's why I left the interior of the cathedral basically naked. It just appears really big that way. On the side where these pillars are, where you can't really see, I placed my cartography table because it doesn't really matter. You can't see here anyway. It doesn't take away from the illusion of space, but just having this centerpiece, this gives off a vibe of like vastness, even though it's not that big if you think about it. It's like barely 10 tiles wide, and then there's a fire here, and someone who put his bed here, Lara. And one thing I want to mention before anything else, and that's also gonna be a theme, at least in the buildings I build, most buildings should be function over form. By this I mean that the design of most buildings is dictated by their function. Therefore, I usually start with the layout of the different rooms from a top-down perspective. I say most buildings because, especially in the case of churches or cathedrals, this might not be the case. The main function here is worship, and therefore they are often just huge and pompous. In this case, form is function. So that's an outlier basically, but in most other cases it's true. So if you want to create a building, think about the purpose first, and you will find that the shape of it will come to you naturally. And once you have the basic shape, then you can start thinking about what would my nation do with this? How would these people make adornments? What kind of adornments could they make? What's their technology level? And all that jazz. And another thing that's really important is location. Where would you put your building in the first place? Why would it be there? Why would the whole city be there? Mostly, there's a good reason for the city to be there. Often it's resources, crossroads, or bridges, stuff like that. Maybe social gathering points. I already made a video talking about this topic in more detail. I'm gonna link it in the description and in the end card. For churches in particular, people even used very specific spots. You might find a church on a specific holy site. Sometimes they use geometry to determine the perfect location for this church. Maybe it's exactly 90 degrees north from whatever other holy building or religious site. And not only churches, there were whole towns built after certain geometries to honor God, basically. Or maybe to form a holy symbol. So if you're creating a city, at least your city center can be very well thought out. After that, it's kind of chaotic. After that, the city just grows naturally. But the city center might be a planned city. For my cathedral, I just used a spot where it's well visible. And I didn't even make it the centerpiece of this town. I'm not that kind of person. It's just sitting in such a good spot that everyone else decided to basically build around it. Although, I gotta admit, I'm happy that it became the centerpiece, because as the portal hub, I think it's a good thing to have it just in the middle of everything. So yeah, this cathedral is basically our portal hub. There's a second level where you can run around, and I just put the portals in the windows. Now going up here, we come to the first wooden floor of the cathedral. There's some more portals here. And this is where I sleep. Also, there's a big spider attacking the town. That also wasn't my idea, but I kind of like it. And then we go to the next level, which is mainly the towers. Here you can go into the roof. You need to do repairs and stuff. And this is the highest point in the towers. So there's a nice little kind of modern looking house one of my friends built. And then we got this house, which I'm really impressed how my friend built this house. It almost looks like an asset you could just copy and paste into any other game. Or you could remake this with nice graphics and put it in some medieval game. I mean, look at this bedroom, it's insane. One thing about this building, because I would assume this is simulating a real house, missing one very important thing, which is a toilet. Houses mostly have toilets. They also used to have in medieval times. They didn't just dump their feces on the streets, as I already mentioned on this channel. They had outhouses, like little toilet house just out in the open. They had latrines in the city, basically cesspits in between houses. It wasn't just dumped out the window, and it was even a resource. Especially if you were a peasant, you would collect your feces and just dump them on the fields. And in way earlier times, to go to the toilet, you would just go out into your field, dig a hole and shit in it. Alright, so here we got another building by the same guy who built that beautiful house. This is our tavern, basically. This is Peter. Hello, Peter. We built this little fence because Peter had a habit of running into the fire and dying. Alright, I took some time to light all the lights in here, and fire, or just lighting in buildings, is another thing I'd like to talk about, especially in medieval times. In a lot of games and media in general, you see torches inside buildings, like these sconces. This was not done. You didn't have any torches in buildings for several reasons. First of all, they really don't burn that long. Second, they develop a lot of dark smoke, so your whole ceiling would be black in no time. So what did they use? Well, in Viking longhouses, they used open fire. They had a source of fire, and the smoke would just rise under the top of the building and go out of little holes in the ceiling or in the exterior wall like this. And remember, this is fairly early, so if we jump to medieval Europe, you would also have open fires and the smoke would go into a chimney. And there were also simpler houses where the smoke would just go into the roof. They didn't have a chimney all the way through. The chimney just let the smoke into the attic, where you would hang stuff like sausages and spices like this, so this is actually quite accurate, for them to be smoked. They would just be smoked naturally by just you having a fire on in the lower stories. Of course, firewood is not that cheap. So what you really want is have windows. A feature that this building is lacking, unfortunately. But oh well. So windows would be your best light source, and once it got dark, you would simply go to bed. Or you could use the one light source that was actually available back then, which is candles. If you wanted to do anything while it's dark, you would use candles. However, having everything lit by candles all the time was something only the rich could afford. Candles really weren't that cheap, so you would really just use them if it was really necessary. If you're maybe a craftsman, you would only work by candlelight if you really had to meet that deadline. And the funny thing is, despite what every game ever wants to tell you, people didn't even use torches outside. You just wouldn't go outside in the dark a lot. And if you really had to, you would use, again, candles. Like if you had go to your outhouse or take a shit in your field, you would take a little candle. This candle could be made out of beeswax, but it mostly wasn't because beeswax is quite expensive. So mostly what you had in your candles was tallow, which is basically cooked from the remains of animals. Because when you slaughtered an animal back then, basically everything was used. Alright, for the last part of this video I went to my current building site in the plains. I wanted something with a nice view, where I can't be attacked. So I decided to build on that hill, and I also raised the ground a little. And guess what? That's exactly what they did in medieval times. They raised the ground a little. Or they built on a hill. That's why most castles are on hills. It's just really hard to attack. Another option would just be a mod and bailey, but that's a little difficult to do on a hill. So if you're designing a fantasy castle, put it in a nice, well-defensible position. For example on a hill, or there could be some obstacle to one side. Maybe it's in the mountainside, or at the sea, or at a big lake, or maybe there's just a mod around it. Doesn't even have to be a man-made mod, could just be a swamp. Point is, just make your castle easily defendable. And this position would also impact your world building. For example, there were Slavic people who settled in swampy areas, so they had to fight all their battles in winter when the swamp was frozen over. And then when they attacked in summer once, it totally caught their enemies off guard. There's a second option in which the castle goes where it's needed. Say you have a toll bridge and you want to secure that toll bridge, you just put a castle next to it. Or maybe just a smaller outpost, something like that. So yeah, that's basically all the medieval wisdom I can share with you for today. However, I'd like to come back to my theme of function over form, because as you can see, this is just a construction site so far. And I'm gonna build this whole building around its purpose. This is something that's not really possible in the real world. Or maybe it could be done, but it would be very hard. But this is a game, and I can just build the interior first and then build the walls around it. So that's exactly what I'm gonna do. And I'm just gonna let that dictate the overall form and shape of this building. I'm not sure if it's gonna be a castle, maybe it's just gonna look like something else. I have no idea yet. I'm just gonna build. And I implore you to do the same if you're trying to come up with a building. Think about what would be inside, what rooms are there, what are they for, and if you can't think of anything, just do some more research. Like that, you can begin with the layout, so you have the function part, and that will dictate the shape of your building. You don't even have to get creative and come up with anything, you just have to think about what you need. And if you now feel the urge to create a castle or a palace or whatever, I would love it if you could send me your design so I can present it on my channel. As always, links in the description. That's all for today, thanks for watching, have a wonderful time, Muffin out.